I don't know what was wrong with me that day. Maybe I was drawn to trouble or couldn't resist making bad choices. What I do know is that one careless moment changed my life forever. It was November 22nd, 1998. I had just come back from a disappointing deer hunt. The trip had been a waste of time. The deer were too alert, and my clumsy movements through the woods probably scared them off miles away. Frustrated, I returned home a day earlier than planned. When I arrived, my driveway was blocked by someone else's car. Annoyed, I parked 2 houses down and stepped out, carrying my Model 70 Winchester rifle, something I'd never leave unattended in my car in our neighborhood. As I glanced toward my house, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. There, on my front porch, was my wife, Linda, locked in a kiss with another man. It wasn't just a friendly peck. This was different. My heart raced with anger. Without even thinking, I raised the rifle and fired. I didn't aim properly, which is unlike me when hunting. Instead of hitting his torso, the bullet struck the man in the back of his right knee. The soft-tip .30-06 cartridge tore through him and also hit Linda in her left thigh. Chaos erupted in an instant. Before I could process what I'd done, I felt a sharp blow to the back of my head. I fell to the ground dazed as someone pinned me down and cuffed my hands behind my back. It turned out my neighbor, just 2 doors down, was an off-duty police officer who acted immediately when he heard the shot. Soon, ambulances and police cars arrived, their sirens piercing the neighborhood's silence. Neighbors gathered, screaming and panicking. A nurse from the crowd rushed to help my wife and her lover, trying to stabilize them until the paramedics took over. My name is Bill Carter. I work at a welding shop in Allentown. I'm not a master welder, just someone who does rough repairs and drives a truck. The pay isn't great, but it's enough for someone with my modest skills. Until that day, I was just an average guy trying to get by. But everything changed in an instant. I was obviously guilty. My public defender didn't sugarcoat it, either. Yet, I stubbornly refused to plead guilty, convinced I'd acted in a way any man would to defend his honor. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was. Linda's honor wasn't worth defending, not after what I saw. As a first-time offender, I thought the court might show some leniency, but my actions were severe. I destroyed that man's leg, leaving him with a permanent disability. Linda's leg was spared but damaged, and she would limp for the rest of her life. To make matters worse, she had an ugly scar on her face from hitting the concrete steps when she fell. Seeing Linda in court every day was painful. The trial didn't last long, just 1 day, but it felt like an eternity. The prosecutor didn't hold back, painting me as a cold-blooded criminal. They paraded the victims before the jury, emphasizing the devastation I caused. And so, my moment of anger and stupidity led me here, facing years in prison. Looking back now, I know I should have walked away, but in that moment, I let my emotions take over. I ruined 3 lives that day, his, hers, and my own, when I screamed in court that it was my right to defend my honor. My already overwhelmed lawyer tried to silence me, but the damage was done. 10 years. 10 stinking years. That was my sentence. I was sent to SCI Rockview, a medium-security prison just a few miles north of Penn State University. Ironically, the fact that both Penn State and State Penn were in the same county was the kind of dark humor the inmates joked about. Rockview might have been classified as medium security, but prison is prison. Inside, the unwritten rules divided inmates into factions: whites, Hispanics, and blacks. Being blonde-haired and blue-eyed, I was as white as they come, which made me a target right away. It didn't take long before trouble found me. Hector, a thug from the Latin Kings, decided he wanted to make me his victim. I was new and just trying to survive, but without protection, I didn't stand a chance. One day they grabbed me, pinned me down, and it happened. I won't describe the details, but 3 of them took away my dignity that day. Prison security? A joke. Medium security meant medium effort in keeping us locked in, not protecting us from each other. The injuries I suffered made it obvious what had happened, but snitches don't last long in prison. If I had reported Hector and his crew, I'd have turned my 10 years into a death sentence. So I stayed silent. My cellmate, an older white guy, saw what had happened. He didn't pity me, though. Pity doesn't exist in prison. Instead, he taught me the harsh realities of survival. "Work out," he told me. "Get stronger. I'll help you get into the Brotherhood." I'd never been a racist. I didn't have anything against blacks or Hispanics before, but in that world, survival came first. If I didn't join the Aryan Brotherhood, I'd never make it out alive. Months later, I was bigger, stronger, and angry. I found Hector alone, without his crew, and I gave him a taste of his own medicine, stripping him of his so-called status. After that, I was transferred to SCI Greaterford, a maximum security prison. Greaterford was a hellhole, far more brutal than Rockview. But now, I had Brotherhood protection. Inmates respected strength and loyalty to your people, and I had both. My time was brutal, but at least I had a shred of safety. In January 2009, after serving nearly all my time, Correctional Services transferred me to a rehabilitation center in Allentown. By then, the world outside felt like a distant memory. I had a parole officer who did me one small favor. He got my commercial driver's license reinstated. The license was only Class B, which meant I could drive straight trucks but not tractor-trailers. Still, I was hopeful. I went from company to company, ready-mix businesses, material haulers, even my old welding shop, but no one wanted to hire an ex-con. It was 2009, and the economy was in shambles. Jobs were scarce, and employers weren't going to take a chance on someone with a record when plenty of clean candidates were desperate for work. My 10 years behind bars felt like a shadow I couldn't escape, no matter how hard I tried. My boss eventually found me a job with a company that had the most fitting name possible, Brown Services. Why was it so fitting? Because Brown Services specialized in septic tanks and portable toilet cleaning. Owned by a guy named Jim Brown, the company seemed to have no trouble keeping busy, even during the Great Recession. Septic tank work might sound terrible, but it was the cushy side of the business compared to what I was stuck with. As a new hire, I got the dirtiest jobs, cleaning and pumping portable toilets at construction sites. In August, with the heat scorching, it felt like hell on earth. One particularly miserable day, I was sent to a construction site north of Bethlehem to service the toilets. The site was for a new self-service gas station, smack in the middle of a working-class neighborhood. After finishing my stinky job, I headed for the exit, and that's when I saw her, Linda. She was stepping out of her old car, the same one she'd had 11 years ago. She was in front of a 1970s brick ranch-style house, probably where she lived. I'd never cared to find out where she'd gone after the divorce. She'd served me the papers while I was still in jail, and with no kids or alimony involved, we hadn't crossed paths since. She still had that limp from where I'd shot her leg. Even with an augmented shoe, her left leg was shorter than the right. I smiled bitterly, thinking she deserved it. I hadn't seen her boyfriend, Captain Hook, as I'd nicknamed him, but I was sure he was long gone. He probably dumped her after losing half his leg. They both deserved every bit of misery that came their way, but it wasn't enough. 10 years in prison weighed heavily on my mind. What I'd done to them didn't seem to warrant a decade behind bars. Hell, I thought I deserved a medal for standing up for myself and my honor. I wanted more revenge, but I couldn't think of a way to get it without landing myself back in prison. 2 weeks later, fate handed me an opportunity. My assignment that day: return to the same gas station near Linda's neighborhood. It was sweltering, about 90 degrees, and my tank was already half full from earlier jobs. Maybe I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been half-stoned from smoking pot that day. Truth is, you can't last cleaning out portable toilets without something to take the edge off. But as I worked, the idea kept nagging at me. By the time I finished cleaning that especially nasty toilet, thought turned to action. I drove over to Linda's house, parked in front of her big living room window, and shifted the truck into reverse. Without hesitation, I smashed through the window, shoved the hose inside, and unloaded everything, every vile, disgusting ounce, right into her house. I laughed like a maniac as I drove away, knowing I'd destroyed her home and everything inside. It was poetic justice, as far as I was concerned. Let them tear the place down or let the fire department use it for training. It didn't matter to me. Of course, things didn't go as planned. By the time I came down from my high and wandered downstairs, it was 7 p.m., and the cops were already at my door. It wasn't hard for them to figure out who was responsible. Linda was renting the house, not owning it, so she and her young son were now homeless. Turns out her bastard child wasn't even Captain Hooks. He was long gone, leaving her to fend for herself. As the officer read me my rights, I lit a cigarette and took a long drag. I knew I was heading back to Graterford, but for some reason, I didn't care. Maybe because I'd finally gotten my revenge, or maybe because, deep down, I knew I didn't belong anywhere else.